Interviewing Paul Noles. The date is January 12th, 2004. Hello, Mr. Noles. Where were you raised and born and raised?
I was born on the Benton County line. Benton Carroll. Woody Keith Place, you know where that's at. And I moved to Buena, they said when I was 2 years old. I don't remember. That's the only place I ever remember living in Buena, Vista. But they said I was 2 years old. I was born March 10th, 24. On the Carroll and Benton County line. He just ordered the house in Benton County and put it in Carroll County. I don't know what room I was born in.
What year did you go to work for the railroad?
43, November 13th, 1943.
Okay, when did you move to Bruceton?
Moved to Bruceton 1950.
1950. Can you give me, what do you remember about the railroad, what it's like when you first went to work there, how big the yard was, and...
Well, when I went to work for the railroad, split up in division. My division was from Paducah to Memphis. I didn't work in Memphis, but Bruceton Yard when I was working. Bruceton Yard belonged to the Nashville Division. The Nashville Division was Nashville to Hickman, Kentucky. And so then the L&N, that was the NC. I went to work at the NC. The strike was 55, and I'll say the L&N and NC merged about 57. So you had 2 years on the strike. And then they merged, and then the middle division, called it National Division. That was Nashville to Hickman, Paducah to Memphis. And that's what the bridge building department at that time, and they got in the building department in 55. And they had divisions cut up. They had 3 divisions: North Louisville Division, Evansville Division, and Nashville Division. And then the L&N, Seaboard taking them over. And then they give us more territory. Russellville, Kentucky, that was all Nashville, Russellville, Kentucky to Memphis. Nashville to Memphis. Let me see. I don't remember what year then. Seaboard to Chelsea. Seaboard. And then there wasn't much change in seniority district and all. But, now when the L&N taking over, the biggest change in our seniority district and everything, because we merged everything with them, seniority and everything. Then the CSX taking over, which is for the town, CSX. I worked for 5 different companies and worked a lot of the same territory, except more.
What do you remember about the yards back then? Were there lots of trains? How many tracks?
Yeah, there's...
passengers coming in?
There's 21 tracks down here at the Nashville Yard, and there was 22 really had one they called a short track. 22, the trains come in from 4 ways. It was a terminal. You come in from Paducah, Kentucky, Nashville, Memphis, and Hickman, Kentucky. Passenger trains that all come there and meet and passenger transfer over to the other. They had the fire garden around the depot down there at the end, and then they kept the yard up. It was pretty when they had passenger trains in there. I rode passenger trains back and forth to work. That's the only way we had transportation then. People didn't have cars like they do now, and then when they catch passenger trains off, I got passes and old freight trains back and forth to work. Got to driving. seat and camp cars when I started.
Would you describe for the viewers what a camp car was?
Well, a camp car was just a regular box car made into a camp car with windows and doors. There's 8 of us in one car. 4 bunk beds in each room. No electricity. No bathroom. Had them bunk beds, one separate with the other, and they just wood beds with no mattress sewed in. It was rough sailing back then. I went to work on the railroad. There wasn't no convenience to it. We would work out there all day, and when the nights so hot you couldn't sleep in the camp car. But then the union got strong. I went to work, the union wasn't very strong. Then they made us, they made them put lights in the cars where we could have fans, regular lights. And had a shower car, bathroom car. The union did all of that. If it hadn't been for the union, I don't know where we'd have been.
Well, what year was the big strike you were talking about, and how long were y'all out?
55, and we're out 58 days.
58 days. And what was the strike about? What were the conditions you were hoping to achieve?
Well, that was part of it, the working conditions, and of course that's for raises too. But working conditions was a lot of it. He didn't even have him camp car screen. Wow. That's what made me a strong union man. Union got us just about everything we got, really.
Well, I know that you were a strong union and that you were a union steward. What years were those?
Let me see. Well, I was local chairman for the welders.
Local chairman for the welders.
Let me see. I was thinking from about 60 to 75 I was here. Welders.
And then after that, did you continue on in any capacity with the union other than being a member?
Well, no, after I got out of that, I just remember. I was local chairman, and I give that up. A lot of work to that, working on paperwork and everything, and working away from home and everything. Give that up to somebody else.
Well, what do you remember about the depot? I guess it was like maybe an airport terminal, seeing lots of people come and go. Did you see lots of people? And
Oh yeah, around the depot was nice. They had flower gardens and had it all fixed up. I mean, it was real nice. People coming down on pasture trains and all. They had the guy down here in this yard and did another yard. That's all they did. They worked in flowers and keep the place up right now, looking nice. They changed out mail there, had them old, what they call little trucks there, 4-wheel buggies. And pasture trains would be there for a while, changing out mail and changing out pasture. It's just no comparison now, because how much it's improved in the railroad. What it was nowadays.
now you worked from what years to what years?
I worked from, let me see, 43 to 55 in the bridge and building department. Went up in the welding department in 55. Worked as a welder, helped for 2 years, and got welded job in 57. I stayed in the welding department until we retired. I had about 37 years welding department. I worked 47, a little over 47 years.
47 years you worked for the railroad, and you retired in what year?
1st of January of 91.
Could you kind of think about and summarize the changes of the railroad and, you know, how big it was and what some of the differences and why do you think it has gone down employment during that time?
When I first got a welding job, we had a one-cylinder motor car. The only transportation we had.
Could you explain to the viewer what a motor car is?
Well, it's a little car that run on the track, and it didn't even have a starter on it. You had to push it off and catch it. Not like a rabbit, one cylinder. Yeah. And when you get the job, you'd have to put that off the track. Of course, it usually make a ramp somewhere or another where they're working with it on it off. You didn't know where the train was at. You listened to the train with the smoke from the steam engine. And you just run the look mostly. And I was on the bridge gang. They had a motor car. It had an A-model motor in it. And that's the way they do it. Then they'd go out to work with home and he'd go up to the curve and he'd have a man take his leg and run around that curve for protection. And that's what kind of protection we had. Just didn't have no protection much. And then they got the radios, telephones, put these telephone booths up every so many miles. I'd help us out and we could talk to the dispatcher. Find out where the trains is at. Of course, he'd give you a line up then on the trains like you were working between here and Memphis. He'd say it's 185 or whatever the engine number was, left Bruceton your own time or whatever you got to have. We had to have a rule book with us all the timetable. But you still couldn't tell where the train was at the time you left. Yeah. And then we went from there to got trucks, the highway over the radio. You could talk to the dispatcher anywhere out there. And you had to get a block, what you call a block. You left Bruceton here. You could get a block, say from Bruceton to Huntington. Our dispatcher wouldn't let no train in there. You know you're safe then. And you cleared it. You had to tell him that you was out of that block. And then them blocks run all the way from Memphis, high cold block from Huntington to McKenzie, just all the way, and that's where you got your time. They wouldn't hardly give you a block at the time. This is, you get one place, you call in, get another block. So that's a big improvement. I don't know why people didn't get killed out there on the railroad. That's why they didn't have any protection. We was out there working, didn't know where a train was at, nothing else. It was just guess. They give you what you call a lineup. You got them telephone booths, you go to the lineup and you have to write that down. Dispatcher will tell you what time the train was due out, get on time. You can look at the rule, the timetable in there, what time the train is due out. It was something working back then.
Well, what was life like when you were working out on the track somewhere and you were staying in camp cars and you had several workers? What did you do for entertainment and what was life like then? I know it was hot.
There just wasn't much entertainment. We always lay at some little place like Beauty or Westport or somewhere like that. And of course the stores stayed open there most times late, and that's about what we do. And we'd look around them stores a few times. There wasn't no entertainment much going on. You just had to entertain yourself, pretty much. Of course, we lay in Jackson, Memphis, or Nashville, somewhere like that. It's always a show to go to or something other. Most times when you're in Nashville, Memphis, places like that, that's where them camp cars would be at some little station. Like Union, Westport, of course, there's a depot at just about every little station then. Just about every little station, University. Then they had a big depot there. Railroad was where everybody gathered up and passed the train in the local towns. About train time, that's where the crowds would be at the depot.
My understanding was that they built the railroad more or less out of swamp there, out of hollow rock, that the railroad filled that in, and do you remember anything about that?
Well, no, the yard was built when I was down there, but you can go down there and right in the middle of the railroad yard right now. I'm going to tell you, drive a iron rod down in there and you won't go 4 feet, so it'll be blue mud and water. And now it's been built up with gravel stuff, so it holds up. And it's still on the swamp, really.
Do you remember the changeover from steam to diesel?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember when the first, well, the Blue Goose, they called it, it just had a hood on it. It was a steam engine. I can remember the first time, remember where I was working at, the first time I ever seen it. And I can't remember what year the diesels come out with a regular diesel, but they run out what they call a Blue Goose, and they had it streamlined. They had a hood over it, and it looked like these diesels now.
But you don't remember the first diesel, roughly what year would you think? Just a rough estimate.
I'd say the diesels have been here since about, I don't think they was here for the 80s. They might have been too, might have been 70s.
Yes, I was thinking it's more like the 50s and 60s, but I could be wrong there. Do you remember the last steam engines were?
No, I really don't remember the last steam engine date.
Okay, could you, what were some of the businesses when you moved to Bruceton that you remember that?
Well, C.A. Jordan was the biggest business. Conway Jenkins had a garage down here. Dudley Bell, he had a business here. Let me see, somebody else. Reed Lumber Company.
Yes, it was my understanding from my reading, where was Reed Lumber Company located?
Right down there about where James Butler lives.
Okay, is he the one that moved his business completely from Lexington to Bruceton, or that may have been in the earlier years before you went to work for him? I know I have read that Bruceton was growing so fast that somebody from Lexington just moved their whole business to Bruceton. But
I believe Holcomb Produce, I believe, was here in business, and they moved to Lexington. I can remember when they was here, just a kid.
they moved to Lexington from here. I thought I read where we used to have a produce
They were related.
supplier here.
Ed Porter Holcomb's brother. They said they was Ed Porter's brother. I can remember. I was just a kid. What his house down there. Then Helmstranger had a mule barn here.
Yes, I have read about the mule barn, and I didn't know that at one time Bruceton was a mule center, and said they had the pens specifically for the mules. Was he a pretty big time operator in mules?
Oh yeah, he told how many thousand mules. All of that's in that paper that he did.
Do you remember that? I know that
Yeah.
you and your dad used to plow.
I used to come down there as a kid down there to that barn. They'd unload them mules and well, cattle too. Feed them and water them here at Bruceton and load them back up in them cars. He had to feed them and water them animals. And they had a big stock pen down there on the railroad. Now, Helmstranger's mule barn was right there where the cotton gin used to have where Root and Alexander's feed mill was at.
Alexander Brothers Feed, that's where he had his,
That's where Helmstranger's mule barn was at. It burned there, burned up a lot of good mules.
oh, it did? About what year was that? And About how many mules burned, do you think?
Gosh, that was way back. I was a good big boy, but I was young. Murray Ford worked for it down there all the time. Yeah, he had $500 team back then when there wasn't any money. That's where it stayed. Or Saturday got it when it was stock pins. He was born. That is Bobby Bowler's granddaddy.
Moving on a little bit, what about the social life in Bruceton? Of course, I know before you were married, seems like there were some saloons, maybe a place called the Dugout, and could you tell me some of those businesses and what they were like before they outlawed the sale of alcohol in Bruceton or beer, and what year they outlawed it?
Chester Roberts run the pool room down in the basement. That's Doug Robertson's daddy. He worked the railroad. He had a fireman down there. Zeke Rogers run the pool room.
And they sold beer.
Yeah, they sold beer. That's Freeland, William Freeland's mother run a cafe and beer place down there. Or his mother's daddy too. His daddy was a fireman. He worked the railroad. Also were a 10-cent store down there. Mr. Mathis run a shoe store. Castellino was a jeweler, run a jewelry shop. We all down there pretty close together. Down there where the fields burned. Doc Smith from the drugstore there where it's at now, that was a white weatherboard building. That was the other morning he died. That's when he died. I was standing out there in front talking to him. He went back in and sat down the booth and died. No one working for him. I said there's something wrong with Dr. Smith, and then he pulled it up and he did.
What? I understand there was a business below what is now where Dr. Lawrence had his doctor's office, that there was a place there called the Dugout that had a one-lane bowling alley. What do you remember about that?
He had a bowling alley there, and he had a restaurant there, and sold beer. He had square dances there. He had run a big business, then he had a boarding house up on the top floor. Basement, he had the bowling alley. He had a pay and sold beer. And upstairs, that's where most of them girls worked in factory boarding. They didn't have cars in to go back and forth. Let up and give Huntington County up the board down there for a week, and on the weekends. All them rooms up there where Dr. Lawrence's office had, that was what's called hotel rooms in. Boarding.
Do you remember when HIS moved its factory to Bruceton, right?
Yeah, I can remember when that factory was built. Just a kid, I remember when that factory was built. And just about everybody that worked there had to buy $100 stock in that factory. I think they paid him all back. Hit him a sister bought a stock there. And just about everybody that worked there had to buy one. But they said that Sam paid all their them stockholders back their money after so many years. There wasn't no jobs around here.
Well, I have heard the story that they used to run a train before HIS moved to Bruceton. They would pick the women up on Monday and take them to Dixon on the train and bring them back on Friday. Do you remember that?
Well, I don't remember that, but it probably did, because they run them passenger trains now and get football teams, football players. Ball games, Lexington, Union City, and places like that.
Yes, I have heard stories of them taking trains and read articles 2 ball games. They used to have, I believe, maybe some dances downtown. Do you remember that, or any dances, or?
Well, I remember having dances in the park down there. Now the dugout was a dance hall too. They danced down there. They danced every night or any time they wanted to down there. And then they had the
dugout was kind of wide open, wasn't it?
dugout was wide open.
Any stories from there?
No, I was there the night the guy lost his beer license. Someone like Miller was sitting there at the table. Highway patrol would come in and said, "John, how old are you?" Of course, I'm scared her when he looked up and said 16. And the patrol didn't say nothing else to Herman when he went on back there to Herman Cook. Please. Talked to him, you give him 30 days, and that's when he lost his beer license. That's when the dugout went down. He lost his beer license and everything. Wasn't long as he told us after that.
Remember any big brawls or anything like that going on there?
Yeah, they have fights down there once in a while. I've seen some pretty good fights down there. Hartley boys and Cameron is over there. They're pretty rowdy. Of course, there's some around here was too. And they get together every once in a while.
Who was the police officer during that time?
Well, John Cawthon was one of them. Guy Colvin. Hill Taylor. Mr. Howell. Yeah, from Benton County. Guy Cole was the longest policeman down here. He got along with everybody. He was the only police they had. Him and Curtis Sheridan would be with him sometimes the weekend. Guy wasn't afraid of anybody, but he didn't give anybody any trouble. Back then, people wasn't out of order. The law didn't bother them. Guy wasn't afraid of anybody now. You could carry them in if you needed to carry them in, but if they wasn't out of order, he wouldn't. Back then, if somebody drank a few beers or something or other, if he wasn't out of order, they didn't pay it no mind.
When did you meet your wife, and what would y'all do for a date during those days?
Well, most of the time we'd go to the show or like that.
Now, when you say the show, were you talking about at Bruceton or Huntington?
We went to show at Bruceton, the night at Tornadoes at Bruceton. Just had left. We lived in Unit.
So you were there the night that it hit?
Yeah. I was working in Memphis, and Pally and Haggard Brown, his wife, or Pally and Haggard's first cousin. He brought Alman down, and they met the bus. I got off the bus, I came in on the bus. We went to the show. I had no more than got home, but it was good.
Could you describe some of the destruction the tornado did to Bruceton?
Oh yeah, it done a lot of damage to the bank and drugstore. Just about destroyed the main business part of town. I know just anything in its path it got could be a little outbuilding outside of them good buildings, and the good buildings would be torn to pieces, the little outbuildings would be standing. So I reckon tornado, just anything in its path, what it gets. Yeah, Bruce and I didn't know it the next morning. I got up and just come down there and we did everything roped off. People was looting stuff and the police was there. We had a time when people stealing stuff.
Any characters or people you remember particularly, or people you work with, or stories that happened that might be humorous or of interest?
Well, can't think of any. There's a lot of stuff happening out there, though. I had a few accidents out there and working with another welder working in queuing once. Doing some welding, working together, and a big frost on the ground that morning. A.J. Don from Hamilton, he was the other welder. And then you had to put out a stop sign to work out there. That's for where the radios and everything communicated. You put out a stop sign, and the dispatcher, you'd have to give that to the dispatcher, and he'd give that to the train, and they would stop on your stop sign. So A.J. put his high rail truck on first, and put the queue in, and he said, I'll stop down there and put a slow worker out. He was always working on the same slow worker. I said, all right. And I was looking at him, some big tractors downhill. That steel, you couldn't stop him high rails, no telling how far it was high, some frost on the way. So I was watching him going down. I used the way in front of him. I started hitting my brakes, so I was sliding, I lit up. I kept motioning Ray J was gone, and I don't know radio already. And he didn't get the message. I got pretty close to him. Well, he seen what was happening. He went and jumped his truck. Before he could get started, I hit him. Broke over his hole, throwing high rails up. Well, that ended that day's work. I had to pull him back in after the queuing, and then go to the record and get his truck to the garage. Then another time, I was pulling the rail crane, a section people get of it. It always had me with a section gang changing out rails, cutting rails and putting bolts out and welding tools. Well, in the middle of the section foreman, he come out of the Kansas, we go to rail. Well, that push car, he had a load of rail on it, come on a hook on the truck. And there was a hook to it. So here it comes. I was no truck then, and the truck wouldn't back up fast. I kept backing up down there, I got to gain this crossing, and then the gaining on me, I seen he was going to hit me. I just locked the brakes on it and got out. And that boy was working with me, he had already jumped out and hurt his back. He was off for a long time. I stayed with it, I seen that brother. The rail was going to hit me. So he hit me and tore the truck up. And then they charged me in the middle. There was no way in the world I could do anything about it. I told him, I said, I did the same thing that I done before. I didn't charge him if you want to. I said, I told him what happened. That's all I've got to tell him, investigation. So they went on. Set the investigation up about 2 weeks after that at Nashville. I was working in Paris, and I come home and they told me tonight and told me that I wasn't going to have the investigation and then middle taking full responsibility. And they give him some time off, they didn't give me any time off. That was about the only 2 accidents I reckon I had. I had a lot of close call the train to welding. I got the trains getting my tools, and I rolled it off Nashville. Once my helper was, they were standing there looking at work in my apartment houses up there at Bellevue. And Lawford was the engineer. He said, I just knew you had me. I looked up, my train was coming around the curve, and I just rolled off the track. I got my tools and seat. But I never did even report that. He didn't either. So we wasn't too bad to report anything out there, but we could get by without it, or somebody get involved in trouble.
What do you think were the biggest changes from the time you went to work? How much did you get paid per hour when you first went to work for the railroad?
53 cents an hour.
53. What would you say has been the biggest change in the railroad in your almost 50 years of service?
Well, the biggest change when they got the high rail trucks. There was radios in there, both talk to each other. Men talk to the dispatcher. And it had a radio on it, loudspeaker, you could hear everything that was going on, where the train was at, where the people were working at. And that was the biggest change, I think. It made it the most safest thing that ever happened out there.
What would you say were the best things the unions did for you, and how much did conditions improve and pay after the 53-day strike or 58-day strike that you talked about earlier?
Well, when I started working out there, 53 cents an hour, we didn't get a holiday. Didn't get no vacation. We get a day off holiday with no pay. It shut it down at Christmas time. We used to keep us off 2 weeks with no pay. And we just didn't have any benefits. The union got all of that for us. We got our holiday pay, we got our vacation pay, and got us every raise we ever got. I was making 53 cents an hour when I hired in, and making 15 an hour when I retired. That's how much raise we got over the years. We should make a lot more than that now.
You lived on Highway 70, which has been called the Broadway of America. I think it at one time was the most used highway between New York and LA. Can you describe what Highway 70 was like before Interstate 40? I've heard people say that you saw license plates from all over the country, and
yeah, the license plates was for Carroll County was 35 for years and years. And then they moved it up to 70.
well, I'm talking about like people from other states, and did you see a lot more traffic before Interstate 40 and people passing through from other towns? And
Well, there was quite a bit of traffic before they got to I-40, but there wasn't as much traffic on the highways back then. I mean, I can remember, now you take out there what's called Key Street, that's the old highway, and this old highway down here, and there's Street Mississippi out there, just done a lot to hits since the past several years. There just wasn't too many cars on the road up, so I don't know. But back then, there just wasn't no money much. People didn't have money to buy cars.
do you remember when you got your first television set? About what year was that?
I'd say 51.
51, and what were some of the programs that were popular at that time that you used to like to watch?
Well, what I liked the best was Grand Ole Opry. That was my favorite. The first television I bought was a field coat from Parker Higdon.
And Parker Higdon run a television shop, an electronics shop. Some of your popular shows, Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah, Grand Ole Opry and Amos and Andy, they're on the radio for the television coming in, but they're on television too. Programs like that's what I like. And ball games, they got the ball games. That's most of what I watch now is music and ball games. And soap opera stuff like that, I wouldn't never watch that stuff. And other stories, there just wasn't near as much stuff on television to watch as there are. Now, of course, we just had the antennas in Nashville and Jackson and Memphis was about the only stations you could get, really. Was really plain, and sometimes they would be too plain.
And when do you remember your first air conditioner? About what year you had air conditioning put in your house?
Yeah, the first air conditioner I had put in the house was here. We built this house in '63, and we moved here in September, and I got the air conditioner next summer, so we got to burn up through September. Of course, out there, lived out there on the highway, we had the window fans. A little bottom seat cool out there every night. We moved up here. Brick house is about the hottest house they are when it gets hot. You got to have them just about it.
Well, just as a reference for money-wise, you have a 3-bedroom brick home here. Approximately what did it cost to build in 1963?
Right around 12,000. We about 12,500.
About $12,500.
I built this house. That is '63.
Well, Mr. Noles, is there anything you'd like to add or mention about the railroad or Bruceton or?
Well, I can't think of anything. I can just think of it. I don't know how there's a lot of stuff happening, but just, I don't know, remember it's not as good as it used to be.
Well, I appreciate your time, Mr. Noles, and good luck to you, and you did a great job.
Well, I appreciate it. There's a lot of stuff happening if you just think about it, I can tell. I can think.